All right. Thanks again for joining us today. Again, I'm Alicia Mars. I'm the coordinator for the California Fish Passage Forum. You may have also seen my name floating around. I also coordinate another fish habitat partnership that operates in California, the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative. But thank you so much for joining us today. The forum is really excited to be hosting another one of these webinars. The PAD plan is something that we've been working on with Anne and Neil, who are active members of the forum and manage the PAD for a while to help update the information, kind of a very comprehensive QA/QC effort that we're doing statewide. So we'll get a little bit more into that, but I'm going to switch over here to the agenda slide so you can kind of see where we're headed today. We're going to do a quick version of introductions because we've got so many folks on the line. We're going to do that virtually in the chat. So just full disclosure there, and so you can start prepping for that mentally. And then I'm going to give a quick overview of the California Fish Passage Forum for any of you that may not be familiar with the forum. And then we are going to launch into, hopefully when Anne is able to log in, an overview. She's going to introduce you to the PAD and just kind of an overview of the PAD plan effort. Many of you are probably pretty familiar with the PAD or have used it, but just to give some background there. And then Anne and Neil's going to help with the PAD plan overview as well. And then finally, we're going to end with a couple opportunities for discussion. We definitely want to have some QA or questions from you, an opportunity to go back and forth in relation to the PAD plan and what we're planning to do in Region 3 and what we've done in previous regions. But then we also wanted to just open the floor for a general roundtable discussion on fish passage issues in the region, and just give all of you an opportunity to discuss things that are happening, projects that may be underway, issues that you're encountering, opportunities that you see for improving fish passage, just kind of have some informal discussion and provide an opportunity for that. So before we get any further, what we're going to do is just do kind of a quick introductions exercise, and we've got 50 folks on the line, so I'm not going to ask each of you to introduce yourself. That would take at least a fourth of the call probably. But what would be great is if you wouldn't mind going into the chat and just introducing yourselves in the chat. If you can say who you work for and a little bit about what you do, and or what your position title, that would be really great. And then while that's happening, I'm going to let Neil introduce himself, and I have a feeling that I see Anne on the phone as well. So I'll start with Neil, and then we'll move over to Anne.
Hi, my name is Neil Shiraga. I'm a data management specialist for the PAD. Started just earlier this year, but I work alongside Anne, doing all the QA/QC of PAD records and implementing the PAD implementation plan.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neil. And then Anne, is that you on the phone? I don't know if she can unmute herself. Let's see. She'll need to do her own unmuting if that is her. But thanks so much to everyone that is putting your information into the chat. Feel free to scroll through and see which of your colleagues are on the line. This is really helpful. So for those that are just logging in, we're doing our introductions via the chat. So we're just asking folks to put in the organization they work for, their title, and or maybe a short description of what they do in relation to all
Hi,
this.
Alicia, this is Anne.
Oh, great. There you are.
Thanks. Sorry, if my phone would, I could unmute my own phone, but apparently I had to hit *6. Excuse me. So I'm Ann Elston. I manage the passage assessment database. So for some reason I'm having computer issues. I can't log in, so I'm calling in. But thank you all for being here this morning.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear your voice, Ann. That's great. All right. So please feel free to keep putting the your introductions in the chat box. That's really helpful. I'm going to move on and to the next portion of the agenda here and just give you all a quick overview of the forum, and then we will move into the rest of the agenda. So as I mentioned earlier, one of my roles is the coordinator of the California Fish Passage Forum. And the forum is an association of both public, private, and nonprofit agencies across California that are working in California. Our waters that drain through California, you can see our geographic scope actually reaches up into the Klamath Basin. So a little bit outside of California. But our mission is really to work collaboratively to with this shared mission of protecting and revitalizing anadromous fish populations in California. And so really that's focused on restoring connectivity of freshwater habitats throughout their historical range. So we work across the state, and I'll switch over here to the next slide so you can see the organizations that are currently signatories to the forum. We really are, we have great participation from both state and federal partners. You see them all listed here on the screen. And then Trout Unlimited and CalTrout are active nonprofit partners, and they actually provide our representation. Sandy Jacobson is the chair of the forum, and she's with CalTrout. And then Anna Halligan is the vice chair of the forum, and she's with Trout Unlimited. And so each of these organizations has a different mission within their organization in support of fish passage and improving fish passage in California. And really we're coming together to find ways to collaborate. A lot of that can come in the form of shared science, funding opportunities, best management practices, outreach, thinking about policy issues, engineering, design. There's really a whole gamut of ways that we're working together to kind of navigate best practices. So I'll get a little bit more into what we do here in a second. But as I mentioned, the forum is not the only fish habitat partnership that I coordinate, but there are also quite a few that operate in California, and you'll see them. Oops, we'll go back one slide there. You'll see them on the slide when we get back to it here. And so we are all these fish habitat partnerships, you see their logos on the side of the map, operate under the national umbrella of the National Fish Habitat Partnership. And really we're working together to conserve fish habitat across the country. Each of the fish habitat partnerships has its own flavor or focus. Some of them are species focused, like the Western Native Trout Initiative or the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative, which I coordinate. And they operate in multiple states, but really have focus on a specific species or group of fish. Others operate looking at maybe a specific type of water body or issue. So that could be the Pacific Marine Estuarine Partnership, or reservoir fish habitat actually operates across the entire country. So each of us have different focuses, as I mentioned, but similar in the way that we group our partners and partner participation. We also all receive project funds from NFHAP to support projects that support our mission and NFHAP's mission each year. And so those RFPs are actually, some of them have just been issued, like I believe Winty put theirs out last week. And I hope to have the forums and PLCIs out in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that, and we'll try to help cross-post those opportunities. But, even if a project that you're thinking about that needs funding doesn't fit under the forums criteria, I encourage you to look at these other groups that are operating in California as well as options for enhancing fish habitat in other ways. Okay. So, and I'm always happy to link you up with the coordinators for those groups if you need. So just an example of some of the work that we do, it's not just funding projects that are on the ground. We also work together to dive into various, there must be a timer on that slide, scientific issues. So the forum, the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative, and then PMEP, the Pacific Marine and Estuarine Fish Habitat Partnership, a few years ago received some multi-state conservation grant funding through the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and NFHAP. To look at issues and science and data surrounding barriers to tidal connectivity up and down the entire US West Coast. So this was a multi-year effort, originally hoped to have an in-person symposium, but definitely had to pivot because this was all happening in the height of COVID. So it was all done virtually, but we collected a lot of great information and have an ArcGIS data catalog all available on this hub site that you see linked on the slide. Looking at basically locations and structures that were impeding tidal connectivity. So we convened a full day symposium that many of you may have participated in. And then the next day was a full day workshop with partners from within each of the fish habitat partnerships, looking at ways that we could enhance, take the information that we was presented in the symposium and also collected through the data catalog, and what were next steps that we could work on together moving forward. So some of the results were this BTC hub site, where you can revisit the presentations and things like that from the symposium, but also a report summarizing the spatial data sources. And then finally, we moved, we had some extra funding, and we put that towards one of the information gaps identified through all of this work. And that was focused on the limited information and knowledge that we have in relation to how tidal barriers impact lampreys. So a lit review was really what we needed first. And so we did that. And then the next step was the creation of a new subgroup, actually within PLCI's operating structure, but it's open to everyone under their lamprey technical work group, focused specifically on barriers to tidal connectivity. So that's just an overview of one of the cross FHP collaborations that the forum's involved with. But additionally, the forum, as I mentioned, we do provide some project funds. We work with our other FHP partners, but we do a variety of other things as well. And so some of that hinges on the PAD. Obviously, a lot of that is informed by the PAD, and I'm not going to get too deep into that, but the forum was one of the founding partners in setting up the PAD years ago. And so we continue to utilize the Science and Data Committee of the forum to help assist and be kind of a technical advisory body for the PAD, review data, and then also, that we're helping to support the implementation of the PAD plan that we're here to talk about today. We also, the forum participates in outreach activities. So we have received funding again to help support. We just held actually a big event in the Klamath celebrating the pending removal of the 4 dams and all the fish passage work that's been done over the last 2 decades to prepare for this amazing opportunity that's coming our way to have a free-flowing Klamath River. We also have received funding to look at jump pass criteria. So that was for salmonids, that you can see the picture up there, that was through NOAA. And then that information was later able to be used to help inform the guidelines for salmonid passage at stream crossings, the new guidance that was issued by NIMS a year or so ago, maybe 2 years now. It's all a blur with COVID here. So there's a lot of things that we have our hands in, and we invite you to join us and participate, and you actually are already by participating in this webinar and hopefully helping us out with the PAD plan. So last but not least, I've mentioned the forum does have some small pots of funding available, or a small pot of funding available every year from NIFHAP. And again, the RFP for that should be coming out probably in the next few weeks. But we also try to do our best to help shine a light on other funding opportunities and leverage those funding opportunities as best we can. So there is an unprecedented amount of money coming out right now, especially due to the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. A great example would be the money that's available right now through the NOFO that was announced from Federal Highways Administration, really focused on culverts and weirs. There's billions of dollars coming through that over the next 5 years. And we really encourage folks to think about all these great opportunities that we have in getting as many fish passage structures remediated in these unprecedented times. So I think that is actually it for my slides on the forum. So I will just pause for a second because I think Anne is just getting logged in here, and I'm going to hand it off to her in a second. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop those into the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you. But thanks so much everyone for being so great and pros with your mute buttons.
Yeah, I think, oh, are we waiting for questions? Sorry, I'll wait.
No, it's fine. And I don't see any popping in. So why don't I'm going to stop sharing and let Neil pop up the presentation and you can start in on your overview of the pad.
Sounds good. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Looks great.
Okay, so good morning, and as you heard earlier, Neil is a recent hire. He's been working on the PAD plan implementation that we'll discuss today, and I've been managing the PAD, I should say, for 10 years. So next slide, please. I'll give you a brief overview of the PAD. It is a statewide inventory of fish passage assessments. It is across jurisdiction, so we have information, from counties, cities, different ownerships, so across the entire state of California, and it is publicly available. So it's available on CalFish, on CDFW's BIOS, map viewer. We also engage with the fish passage community. So I send out newsletters when the PAD has been updated, generally on BIOS, provide other information like these webinars, request updates, also respond to any inquiries and questions that the fish passage community and biologists might have and others. And it was created about 20 years ago. We have quite a bit of contributors of data, or we have over the past 20 years, over 100. We have quite a big contact list and are since expanding it. So originally the focus was along the coast for the PAD itself. As you can see in the map to the left, and in the map to the right, as you can see, we have since expanded into the Central Valley, as well as up into the Klamath, above the dams planned for removal. And that said, we have quite a bit of records today, over 26,000. So passage assessments, they do vary in scope, anywhere from single assessments, so assessment at a particular location, such as a road crossing and or a culvert, and then by watershed scale. And in between you have by ownership. Ownerships, for example, all structures on Caltrans, owned by Caltrans, excuse me. And then protocols, they also vary and include less rigorous professional judgment, more rigorous hydraulic modeling. In between, you have rapid assessment protocols and green, gray, red filter. The rapid assessment protocols essentially determine if further analysis is needed. And if it's a potential anadromous barrier. And so then it's run through the filter, determine if it's green, not a barrier, or predicted, red, a barrier, and then gray. Those are ones that need, again, further evaluation and through hydraulic modeling. Hydraulic modeling examples include fish crossing, usually is for road crossings, and HECRAS usually is for dam and dam-like structures. And they essentially determine flows that are, or predict flows that are possible by certain species and life stages. So barriers, what we have both anthropogenic and natural barriers. So the man-made, you can see some examples here. We have a concrete channel in the photo. We have a highway crossing the culvert, and we also have a dam. So we have those type of site types and structures in the PAD, as well as natural barriers such as the waterfall. We have many more actually in the PAD, but potential barriers. So we also have those that need further evaluation, as I mentioned, and then we have locations that have been assessed as non-barriers, and then in addition, those that have were a barrier but have been since remediated. And so we keep track of when it was remediated, the year, what was done, whether it was some sort of retrofit or full span solution, like replaced by a bridge or completely removed, and or in some cases, also we include, like we track that it's been completed essentially. And then diversions. So we have quite a bit of diversions. Mainly they are in the Central Valley, but also we have a lot in Delta. So you'll see quite a bit, or we have seen quite a bit in the Region 3 in the Delta area. That's just primarily where the assessment data has been concentrated, that's been fed into the pad. And we track whether they're screened or unscreened. So as I see, some of the critical information that we have in the pad is barrier status, the type of site structure. I gave some examples, the protocol used, so you can see if it was fish crossing or if it was threshold judgment or something else was used. The species and life stage is really important. We have some information, keep adding to it. A lot of information is coming from the hydraulic models generally, but it's important obviously for prioritization and planning. So as much information we can have on that is best. So that's what we're also focused on, that as it's important. Location, of course, you need to know where it is in the landscape, and then ownership. Some of that, this is one of the areas where we're adding to and trying to, as I'll discuss later, try to clean it up and make sure that we have correct ownership information, up-to-date owner information, and probably in many ways update. A lot of it seems to be blank or not filled in. And then treatment information. We, as I said, we track when treatment's been completed, but we also track what stage in the process that the project is in. So it could be in design stage or somewhere in the early planning stages. So we track that in the pad. And then habitat quality and quantity, another thing that's quite important for prioritization and planning efforts. We have some of that. We're trying to add to it as much as possible. And then, of course, photos. So photos are really important to show, many cases you can see the barrier, the issue. So here's an example where we have before and after, and you can see it's a double culvert, and it was replaced with a bridge. This is a highway crossing up north, and it was a temporal barrier, so it was passable certain flows prior to the replacement, but you can see at least there is an adult unmonitored swimming upstream afterwards. I think there was only a few small select flows that it was passable. So it did improve fish passage. So this is barrier statuses across pad, but this is what we did was, this is just showing locations that aren't Caltrans owned. So we could see basically, this is what we're focused on cleaning up through this process for the most part, and I'll explain why in future slides. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of barriers identified as complete barriers, quite a bit of unscreened diversions so far in the pad, and then quite a bit of those. Of course, we want to focus on the unassessed and unknowns. There might be something known about that. It would be great to either identify them as a known barrier, not a barrier, or whatever they might be. So accessing the pad. Central location for accessing the pad is calfish.org. There's a pad program page on there. Karen Wilson does a great job. She's the one managing this cowfish. And so data access, there's several links, and one of them, you can link to the data in the data access tab. One is the pad data portal. It is updated the day after I make changes. It has, what's nice is you can query here, you export it as a CSV and bring it to Excel. It has a lot of XY, it has a lot of the critical fields, as I mentioned, barrier status. You can also query it here if you wanted. This one is just showing all the barrier or the records within Humboldt County. And another thing to note is this little page icon that takes you to a document if there was an assessment tied to it. And then PAD is also available in BIOS. You can go straight to BIOS, but what's nice to going through CalFish, one thing is already preloaded. So you just click the link and it loads a BIOS viewer, and it has the PAD, so you can already, it's selected already, and so you can identify you could work with it right away. And that's updated 3 times a year. It was last updated September. Also, in addition, Google Earth file, that's updated the same time that BIOS is updated. One thing to note is when that is updated, you do need to, at the moment, you did download a new KMZ, a new Google Earth file. So there's been some cleanup efforts of the PAD. A lot of it has been ad hoc. Here and there, as I or PAD users have seen issues that have included things like duplicates, location errors, barrier status that needs updating, other attribute updates such as structure owner. I've seen some stream names, but some other updates, sometimes just notes too. And then there's been more broader in scope cleanup efforts. So Sharon Powers, who I believe is on the call today, she works for Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. I think before her involvement with Caltrans, she was helping me clean up the PAD, and we focused effort on Del Norte County. So what I was noticing was that sometimes the assessments that are tied to PAD, even the Ross Taylor assessments and other assessments, the information seemed to be not exactly, maybe it wasn't matching what was in PAD. So she went through it and just kind of looked through what was in the reference documents, those assessments, and compared it to what was in the PAD and updated the PAD as needed. And then in addition, over time, I've filled in nulls, advising them, county and watershed fields. I've also seen other fields like protocol that was null, and some other important fields like that. So in addition to our own, PAD cleanup efforts, the Caltrans has done a lot of the cleanup as well as assessment efforts, and they've really been doing assessments since 2002. Focus a lot on, I would say that the time early on in the northern area of California, as well as in the Bay Area, as far south as Bay Area, maybe a little further south. But they've since expanded, and I'll get into that. But in 2014, Caltrans had a contractor, HDR, who subcontracted the work, and I worked with the subcontractor to basically compare or look at locations, Caltrans locations, and see that the locations in the PAD of Caltrans structures really was their structure, meaning that the PAD records were really Caltrans owned, and also cleaned up some of the locations as needed. And then starting in 2016, myself and Sharon Powers started conducting gap analysis. Sharon did a bulk of the work, but what we did was we identified where assessments were needed at Caltrans locations. So we looked at where the California highway system, intersected with or crossed over stream layer, or California streams, and that were in the PAD, and then looked at locations that needed a further evaluation. Maybe they had gotten a first pass or sort of a rapid assessment, but they needed further evaluation, whether it was through green, gray, red filter, or the fish crossing hydraulic modeling. So we provided lists and had two lists, one that needed, like a rapid assessment first pass, one that needed more detailed survey. Provide that to the fish packs who then further prioritize that and the routes that needed to be completed first. I mean, they'll all be assessed, but we need to know where the areas to focus on first. So then what led to that was conducting assessments. So Caltrans has done a lot of assessments since then from Southern California, and now they're going north. And they did a lot of assessments in Southern California and then in Central Valley, and now focus again on north. And they're making a lot of progress. That said, what I didn't mention, so these fish packs, they're fish passage advisory committees, and they're made up of multiple agencies. Many of you might be on the fish packs, but CDFW, NOAA, and many others are on part of the fish packs, and they help Caltrans prioritize locations for remediation, specifically Caltrans locations, and have also helped in this assessment effort by prioritizing where assessments occur. And so when they do the prioritization effort for determining where remediation should occur, that they gather lots of signs and data, and we'll be gathering more signs and data about a whole list of barriers that haven't been prioritized yet, but a list of Caltrans barriers. And that will then feed back into the pad and provides great science and data back to the pad. So that means that at this point, we're getting lots of information about Caltrans structures, or being determined or in the process. So Caltrans is really working on this process, cleaning up their data and getting it, and thus updating the pad. But what we wanted to do is create a strategy to review and update the rest of the pad, essentially. And we created the strategy and then received input from the forum, specifically the Science and Data Committee, knowing that it's a dynamic strategy or plan, meaning we are able to modify it as needed. And I'll explain. We had some lessons that we've learned since implementing this plan, and so we've modified it a bit. So the first step prior to implementation of the plan was really updating our data standards and methodology. So these were separate documents that we put together. The data standards were developed in 2013 and then updated in 2014. Really at the time with Pacific States and CDFW working together to do the updates. And then this latest update was, the forum was more involved, all forum partners, and in reviewing it. And so this data standards essentially ensure that the quality of data in the pad. And it has been used for updating, as new information is provided and as updates are provided to the pad. But as we wanted to make sure that we updated these documents so that when we go ahead and before we implemented this process, because we knew a lot of updates were going to occur, and we want to make sure that everything we update is up to the standard. And so our implementation is a two-step process: a desktop review and an expert review. And the desktop review is essentially, Neil and myself and a few others have been involved in this process. So we are trying to update the pad as much as we can on our end prior to hand it over to the experts. So we identified some things we could do. So one thing is, first we looked at other and unknown site types. So these were where it was for known barrier. So the barrier was some sort of total or some sort of partial barrier, yet the structure type or site type was an unknown or other. It wasn't very descriptive or it didn't have a lot of information for us to go on. So we, in many cases, some of the barrier statuses through this process were updated and lots of the site types. And we also had to rely on some and communicate with some local biologists to find out what the site types really were for those locations. So we resolved a lot, many of them. We're hoping through this entire process where will be resolved. And then next step was identifying deleting duplicates. So first I was trying to do this globally and it was just quite a bit. So what we decided is we were going to look at where locations were within 500 feet of each other to as potential duplicates to look through that. Then because I had gone through 17% of that and then decided that we would do that regionally as we move through before we get to the expert review of each region. So this has been completed in Region 5 and Region 4, and Neil, I believe, is very close to finishing this in Region 3, which is great. And then the next step was looking at stream and downstream names. We know that they were quite inconsistent. And also there had been lots of blank ones. Mark Guard of CDFW helped us fill in all the nulls or all the names that were blank. This will obviously help people when they query and look for locations, pad users and the like. Then after filling in the nulls, we then reviewed and corrected the attributes and locations. So we're focused on, we did a consistency review, kind of reviewing whether there were spelling errors first, as well as spelling variations essentially. And then after that, we compared to the hydrography. So that's been completed for Region 4 and 5 and 4, and partially for Region 3. That's the next step before we send it to the experts. And then lastly, the land ownership. So again, we did a similar consistency review, looking for spelling errors, but also in some cases grouping like US Forest Service and all the different individual forests listed as ownership. So we just grouped that as the entire US Forest Service to make it, again, easier for querying and searching by users. And then the next step would be updating to match, to look at and compare with land ownership layers and make sure they match. Excuse me. And I think that in that case, we'll make sure that we'll fill in a lot of nulls too in the land ownership field. And then the last step was reviewing and comparing reference documents. As I mentioned that Sharon had completed in Del Norte, we thought, because it's a pretty good process, we thought this would be, we initially had this in the pad plan, but when we executed it or implemented it in Region 5, we found it was very time consuming. Only it was partially done. And then we decided that it wasn't really necessary because it was kind of duplicative of the expert review. So expert review, we're going region by region. We already completed Region 5 and 4. We're hoping to still get some of the last little, last little reviews back, or the last reviews back from those regions. We have a few more from Region 5 that we need to get back. But the reason why I will say why we're starting from south going to north is because we really didn't have a lot of the data seemed to be older and maybe not very complete in Southern California for the pad. And another thing is we're focusing on non-Caltrans locations. So because of all the effort that Caltrans is putting into their assessments and cleaning up their data. And then we're also focused on priority watersheds, generally, core and candidate identified in recovery plans. In Southern California, Regions 5 and 4, we focused on NOAA recovery plans. What we were discovering in Region 3, if you've seen the list of watersheds, is we saw that there was, CDFW had a recovery strategy within that area, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had a old recovery plan, 1998, I want to say. So we identified watersheds from that. But what we found in Region 4 was that other people wanted additional watersheds. So please today, when we are done with the presentation, please let us know if there's any other watersheds. I will say at this point, it seemed like we have a lot of Region 3 covered, but there are watersheds, few watersheds we didn't include. So please let us know. We are expanding it as people are telling us, experts are telling us too. Okay, so the expert review steps. The first step then we developed the outreach materials. We did this initially, we created a template in Region 5 before we started the expert review there. And we've been using it all along, like an email template that we've modified as needed. We have identified fish passage experts. So we're kind of going region by region, identifying those experts. First relying on input from other experts, pad contacts, the forum, and then hopefully expanding it and getting more of the word out and getting bigger. I would say that Region 3 is a bigger expert list so far than the regions prior. So maybe we're getting better at it. There's certainly more experts maybe in this region too. And then lastly is contacting this expert. So we're providing spreadsheets, as you can see in this, in the screenshot, I guess. And it just doesn't have all the pad fields, but has the most important ones that we think need updating. And asking you as an expert to update these, look at these and see if they need updating. And providing this as not a whole pad, but by watershed or more than one watershed. And then providing maps and instructions. So as I mentioned, we have learned some lessons through the process. One is identifying priorities. Initially, when we created the plan, we didn't have it fleshed out exactly how we would identify the priorities. But when we had to do it, once we got to Region 5, we were ready for the expert review. So this is where we decided to kind of focus on the watersheds in the recovery plans. And then identifying the fish passage experts. In Region 5, we try to do that on our own. I mean, with help and people who had knowledge of folks in the area and experts in the area. But I will say that we were finding once we sent the experts the data and the watersheds we hoped them to review, that they didn't necessarily have expertise in that watershed. So instead we, for Region 4 and now Region 3, and as we go forward, we're asking experts to self-identify their own watersheds. That's been really helpful. And I will say, if you haven't already, we do look like we have some who already have, but if you haven't already, please fill out that form. It was a link that was provided in the webinar invitation. It really will help us. Even though we have them self-identify, we still find some of this in Region 4 with experts who may have not self-identified their watersheds, but they may have had more watersheds that we weren't aware of, and would have been nice to be. And they asked if they could review these extra watersheds, and it's nice to know ahead of time if possible. And then the response, I think it's been pretty good. Southern California, we had a pretty good response. We only had a few delayed absent responders. Region 4, we kind of just finished the process. So we're still, and some people have asked for extensions, which is fine. So we're still working through that process. We're hoping the next month or 2.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
So These were the results from our last Region 4 desktop review. Maybe it'll give us insight into what we'll see in Region 3. So the review was primarily conducted over ArcGIS and Excel, removing duplicates, checking locations, correcting any errors in the stream names, the downstream names. It's kind of surprisingly high. 1/6 of records about had to have some editing of their stream name or downstream name. While looking at duplicates, most of the duplicates came from before 1999. Most of the recent records are totally fine and clean, but it was the old records that have since been resurveyed that we had to take an extra close look at to make sure they were not duplicates. And then when our next step for our expert review is we have to look at specific watersheds for more targeted review. We use Steelhead, Chinook, and Coho recovery plans to guide us, both from CDFW and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We identified kind of 3 key zones around the bay to kind of help us identify experts. We then work to create and expand on a fish passage expert list, which the Fish Passage Forum provided a lot of help for in building. And then finally, when we reach out to experts, we want them to self-identify. It's really important that we might have an idea of where you work and what watersheds you know, but only you truly know what watersheds you know best. And so zooming in a little bit on these areas, we have the north of San Francisco and San Pablo Bays, Suisun Bay and the East Delta region, as well as south of San Francisco and San Pablo Bay. So if you've not done so already, please fill out the PAD Plan Region 3 Google form. You can provide all your information to it. And then you'll see the same maps you saw previously, as well as all the watersheds listed with their HUC numbers if you want to search them further. And then please indicate your level of experience in that watershed, low, medium, high, or not applicable. Gives us an idea of what experts know what, and we can kind of put a big puzzle together and make sure we have the entire Region 3 covered. Additionally, you can add your own comments below to be more specific of what you know, what you don't know. So after you fill that out and we respond to you, we'll eventually send you an email packet full of an Excel spreadsheet for reporting data, as well as the watershed map on the right, and an instructions document to help you. So the fields are for review that we really want to key in on are barrier type and status, as well as the specific location and the owner of the structure or land, as well as if you have any treatment info, if barrier's been remediated or not, if there is a fishway. That's also really important data that the PAD would like to have. And then watershed map is just a general map of all the records that are currently in that watershed to help you see it and guide you with your review. Again, you will not be reviewing any Caltrans sites. If you receive the watershed Excel document, they won't have any Caltrans sites in them. This is just if you go onto the PAD, your own volition online, anywhere that the structure owner is California Department of Transportation, or if that's the same for landowner, then that's a Caltrans site and you do not need to review it. When filling out the Excel document, it's important that it's dual purpose. It's both updating previous PAD records as well as writing in your own barriers for the PAD. If you do both, that would be really helpful to us. And when moving through the Excel document, notice that there's data validation for many of the columns, kind of keeping the data standardized across all fields, site type and barrier status, really important. Yellow, the fields in yellow, kind of the critical fields. Then the fields in blue are just your own helpful fields. You can mark if you reviewed them, if you've updated it. And then any general comments that you want to leave for us would be helpful too. So looking at the data validation, it's PAD by site types. We have dams, both large dams like Lake Chabot, or even small dams are fine too. Diversions can be large scale diversions or small personal use diversions. Other site types include road crossings. Caltrans sites, they quite frequently survey their own road crossings. So these are road crossings away from Caltrans sites. Non-structural is any non-man-made structure, such as waterfalls or large riffles that could be a hindrance to fish passage. And then there's a whole plethora of other site types, such as green control structures, tide gates, flow measurement weirs, and those are all really important in the pad. If we look at the pad in Region 3 by site type, see that most is diversions and as well as road crossings and dams, but we have a whole range of others, including gravel pits, fish traps, and utility crossings to help narrow your search of when you think about what barriers are in your area to consider. Looking at the pad by barrier status, it includes even barriers that are not barriers, such as a bridge that could potentially be a barrier, but has been determined to not be a barrier. Opposed to that are complete total barriers, many of which are in the pad, but we are always looking for more. Those are really important. Other barrier statuses include partial barriers, which can block certain life stages, not others, as well as temporal barriers, which block fish passage at certain times of the year, such as allowing fish to pass during high flows, but not during low flows. And barriers can be have multiple statuses. Barriers can be partial and temporal. Looking at diversions, we have both screened and unscreened diversions. In order for it to be a screened diversion, it has to meet CDFW and NOAA criteria, such as what's outlined in the California Salmon Stream Habitat Restoration Manual. As you can see on the top right, where we have a diversion that has a rudimentary screen, but it does not meet current standard, so it is considered unscreened. And breaking down the pad Region 3 by barrier status, most are unscreened diversions, but we also have a good distribution of total barriers, partial barriers, temporal, and you can see the mix between even remediated barriers are very important too, especially with the expert review process. We really want to know about all the remediation that's going on in these watersheds. And now our next steps. If you've not done so already, please fill out that Google form, the Region 3 watershed form seen here that I can then link in the Zoom chat later. We ask that these be filled in by December 9th. If you've already done so, great. You can then wait to receive the watershed packet from us so that you can complete your review. They're going to be personalized, so it's going to take a little time to get those out. But once you receive it, please fill it out in a timely manner and send it back. And our rough tentative deadline is in the early 2023 to receive those back. And thank you. We couldn't have done it without so many great organizations and experts from all over the state contributing data and collaborating with us to get this large project done. And we're always looking for new partners to work with and help receive pad data. And now I will send it back to Anne. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, we're going to the next slide, or did you? Okay, well, we're wondering if you have any questions or comments. Here are some examples. Any feedback on this plan? Any other watersheds to add, as I mentioned? Any partners or experts we should include? These are just some examples. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak.
Good morning, John Stead here. I noticed on the expert identification form, it requires, you can't submit the form unless you check a box for every watershed on there, every stream. And it's a lot of boxes. So you might get more responses if you allow responders to just check the boxes for the areas that they do have expertise and then submit the rest blank.
Okay, yes, we were going back and forth what we should do. There's certainly more watersheds in this watersheds. I think they're smaller than there were in Region 4. So thank you for that feedback.
And I see a question in the chat. If you want to, from Zeke, do you see that? Would you like me to read it to you, or?
Oh, you're talking to me. I'm sorry. Yes, 1 second.
It's a question about, he's identified sites that are either erroneous or are in the wrong location, or in the correct location, but with an incorrect stream name.
Correct.
So will the review process allow for fixing those?
Correct, it will. This is exactly what we want. Thank you, Zeke. This is what the kind of information, I mean, besides also updating remediations, but yes, this is what we would like to fix.
Great, thanks. Since I'm talking, I have one other question. I couldn't
Yeah.
see the list of stream names that were included. Will that, you just asked for streams to be added? Is that something that we'll do during this process, or do you want to hear those now? Or
Oh, yeah, the watersheds, you mean?
yeah, sorry.
Sure.
It's hard to know if they're already there, but I can just type out a list of things that I think should be included in our areas.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll do
Yes,
that.
please.
Thanks.
Feel free to do that now.
Well, I'll just type it in the.
Sure. Okay, thank you. We must have left some out in Santa Cruz. I think there was a watershed that we left out or two.
Yeah, I don't know if they're left out because I couldn't see the list from my small screen at the time, so I'll just put them in there.
Oh, okay.
Probably already there, but.
So as Anna and Neil mentioned, there's, this is not limited to what we have here. There is an opportunity if there are watersheds that you think that should be included in the pad plan, especially if you've noted that there, are records that are incomplete or just aren't in the pad at all. This is an opportunity to expand on that as well. And, please feel free to share the information with other colleagues about the pad plan and send, you can send them the Google form, and we'll be reaching back out with the recording to this webinar. And then if you really want to learn about Region 4, that recording is already on our website. So there's lots of ways to share this around. I see a couple other things popping in there in the chat.
Yeah, I was just responding to Jonathan's. The answer is thank you for the assessment. I'll be sure to include it in the pad. Oh, I'm sorry. I sent it directly to Jonathan. Just sent it to everyone.
No, it's great to read it out loud too, in case folks aren't paying attention.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, a question from Jonathan about does CDFW and W have the Stevens Creek Fish Passage Analysis Report from 2020, and about 30 barriers were quantitatively assessed. So there's a lot of new information for the pad. So that's great. Thank you. That's exactly the kind of thing that we're also looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll make sure, we'll try to add that before we send it out to the experts. Jonathan, thank you. And then the last one, Anissa, download pad for GIS. Yes, it is. Currently, you can download, I'm sorry, I didn't get to that when I went over the how to access pad, but it's also, you can get it through the pad program page on CalFish. It's in the same data access tab. I believe it's at the bottom. So you can download it. It is updated the same time when BIOS and the Google Earth file are updated. Are you just wanting to know if there's a download generally a part of pad, or when we provide the data to the experts, we plan on providing just the Excel spreadsheets that will have a link to BIOS and then have a map, but it will have XY too, so that latitude, longitude. But are you hoping to have a GIS file then also in ESA, or just in general how to access the pad and have it as a GIS file? Oh, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay. She says, thank you. Okay, so I'm with DWR. This is Elizabeth Vasquez. I'm with DWR working on the Yolo bypass. There are several groups working in this area with DWR. Do you have a DWR point for the Yolo bypass? As I do believe it splits regions. Yes, we included some of the Yolo bypass, I believe, but we can check the watershed maps. Maybe Neil can even have it go up, but you're right, it does split regions right there. So we do have some of it included, but I can look more. What do you mean, do you have a DWR point for the Yolo bypass?
Maybe are there different pad IDs? Is that the question?
Oh, different points, that's what you're referring to? Yeah.
Not me, but her.
Can you hear me? I don't know if you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, we can.
Yeah, I just want to see if you would, we're talking to the folks that, so we work on the Big Notch project. So we're doing fish
Okay.
passage at the Fremont Weir, which is at the head of the Yolo bypass. We also have several agricultural crossings that we're addressing along the Tule Drain and Canal. But there's also the Big Levels project. There's also Puda Creek, all dealing with different barriers. I didn't know if you had a specific, person at DWR you had as a point for data collection.
Oh, no.
Didn't want to give you a bunch of information from a bunch of different places. Just was curious as if you had been dealing with somebody within the organization.
Not for the old bypass. So it would be great in those projects specifically. No, I think I get some of the information from CDFW engineering group, and I've been out to some of the projects. They look great. I would love a point of contact if possible, or point of contacts, because we are including part of the Yolo bypass and Puda Creek as to review.
All right. Well, I will provide my my lead fish biologist, and hopefully we can give you a roundup, because we do a lot of work on barriers in that area. But like I said, it kind of splits regions, so I wasn't sure who the best and most efficient way to work through some of that was.
Okay, wonderful.
So I see a follow-up, I think, from Zeke about he couldn't see which watersheds were already added. So the following watersheds should be included for Santa Cruz County, if not already. So he listed some of those. So I think the ones that we have included already are in the Google form. And I'm not sure if we've posted the link again to that in the chat, but we can here. It's also available in some of the emails that have gone out about this webinar. And then, yeah, if you see other watersheds that aren't included in that, or just know of offhand like you did, Zeke, please feel free to either put those in the chat now or email Ann and Neil probably, or directly would be the best and fastest approach. So that's great.
And Zeke, I can go ahead and look those up. We can look those up to see that. I think Lydell is I don't know about majors off the top of my head, but I do know we included a lot of the watersheds in Santa Cruz County. We'll double check those and we'll get back to you.
And here is the link to the Google form for folks, if you don't mind, if you haven't had a chance to skim through it or to fill it out, please do. And you can edit your responses. So if you need to go back and change things, you should be able to do that as well. But just always feel free to reach out to us with any questions. Okay. Any other questions about the pad plan, the process?
Hi, this is Kristen Kittleson.
Yeah.
What's your ideal time frame for doing Region 3?
Great question. Ann?
Yes, we've been sort of discussing that. So I think what we are thinking, I think we might have said it early 2023 to at least get feedback. We don't know if we're going to send it out before the holidays. We'll give you, if we do, we'll give you lots of time because we're not going to ask you to work in the holidays, but we're thinking early 2023. And what we had been doing is giving people about a month or a little bit more, up to 6 weeks of time, turnaround time for reviewing it. But again, we're probably not asking for that until early 2023. Initially, we were thinking mid-January, but that's probably too early. So sometime early, we're kind of leaving it open-ended. We still need to do some things on our end. But I think, and with the holidays, we're just trying to make sure we don't, have people work. We're just respectful of people's holidays, essentially. And if we do send it out before the holidays, we'll just make sure we give even extra time. I hope that answers your question, Kristen.
That sounds great. Thank you.
And thank you so much. Kristen gave me a bunch of information, by the way, for San Lorenzo, so that will be added for assessment she did. I hope it's okay I said that, Kristen.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. That's great that you said that.
And that's a great question too, Kristen, because I think that the number one thing in terms of timelines right now is if folks have time to fill out that Google form, that'll really help us, especially as Neil and Ann are going through the information and processing it and figuring out who should help with or who can help with what watersheds. And then, hopefully if they can get that kind of worked out sooner, they'll send it out before the holidays, as Ann mentioned. So if folks are working and have downtime and want to do something like this when they don't have a ton of meetings, great. But we, like Ann said, we want to make sure folks don't feel pressure to get it done over the holidays. So it's a rolling, we'll take the information whenever we can get it. I think that's also just part of this process inherently, right? The pad is never going to be completely up to date in perfect form because things are changing all the time. And so we just really appreciate all of the help that all of you that participate can give, because it'll help inform the process. And as we get, it's really been streamlining region by region. And it'll probably be something that we think about continuing to try to streamline moving forward. So. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll just
go ahead.
I'll just say that, yeah, what Alicia said is, about this, I would say we've gotten pad updates. Obviously, a lot of you on the call today have provided me pad updates. But I think this process, though I have seen so far, is because it's broader in scope, we're getting a lot more. Of course, there are some locations that people don't know about, and that's okay if you don't know about it. If you can put a name, someone might know, so we could follow up with them if you know. And at the end, we hope at the end of this whole process, when we're done with the state, we're hoping we'll have a list of maybe locations we need to follow up on. And a lot of updates.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think one thing, Anne and her team are always working to update the pad, the best that they can with the information that they have in a timely manner. So, if there are other updates, this is not to say like if you're working in another region and there's an update you want to provide to the pad, that's great. We're just trying to do a real comprehensive look at this region by region to do the best cleanup that we can. But updating the pad is a constant, as I think Ann and Neil can attest to. So yeah, just diving deeper. Well, should we open it up into kind of a broader roundtable discussion here, Ann and Neil? And we can always also, it can continue to focus on, or people can always put in questions or ask questions about the pad as they come up as well.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Yep. So we just wanted to kind of wrap it up today by giving you all the opportunity to, because there's so many folks on the line from the region, to just talk about any other fish passage related issues that may be happening. And so this could be new projects that you're planning, that you're looking for collaborators on. We just already had a great example of an assessment that was actually recently completed, but maybe there's some that are underway or planned, projects nearing completion, seeking partners, or other things that are coming. I just saw in an email that came through while we were on this meeting that Fish and Wildlife Service just issued their NOFO for fish passage funding that's funded through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation bill. So there's a great big opportunity there that just was unveiled, but maybe there's other regionally specific or state specific funding opportunities folks want to share or spread the word on. So we'll just kind of open it up here. Again, feel free to unmute yourself or pop a question or a thought into the chat. We heard from partners that this was something that they really hope we're looking to have. This was this portion of the webinar is something that actually came up in the Region 5 review. We didn't do a webinar with them, and we heard feedback from partners that really wished that they had the opportunity to touch base with their colleagues.
Okay, well, I'll start. This is Kristen Kittleson. I'll just clarify what we just talked about. I'm the County of Santa Cruz Fishery Resource Planner, and I've been working with Ann Elston and Jennifer Nelson to complete an inventory of all the barriers on the San Lorenzo main stem. So that is already being done, which is great.
Awesome. Great example. That's perfect.
Since there seems to be plenty of space, I just wanted to mention, something that I think we can all look forward to is hopefully increased Natter's fish runs in Alameda Creek now that the ladder down at the Bart Weir is starting to operate, and there's a ladder at the Alameda Creek Diversion Dam now. So I'm really optimistic that we're going to see a boost in the steelhead and other fish populations in Alameda Creek. Some good news.
Yeah, that's perfect. There's never too much good news.
There's currently monitoring, right? Is anyone looking at Pacific lamprey there as well?
Lamprey is being considered in the watershed. The SFPUC does a lot of, and my group at AECOM helps them do a lot of fisheries monitoring the watershed. So they're taking data on lamprey, and I know that the fish ladder up at the Alameda Creek Diversion Dam includes lamprey ramps. So there are lamprey in that watershed, and they should benefit as well.
Okay, great.
Any other news or topics or issues folks want to discuss? Policy or even permitting issues? And if not, we can end early. I think no one ever scoffs at the gift of time these days. We're all so swamped. Yeah. Jonathan,
I'm gonna chime in with more good news then.
Awesome.
You mentioned permitting. I think everyone on this call is probably aware of all the new restoration permits that also include fish passage projects that have come out with a new order from the Water Board for water quality certification, which also has CEQA coverage, and the new U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biological opinion statewide for aquatic restoration projects. So if you're not familiar with those, make sure you get familiar with them if you're trying to permit some new projects.
Yeah, great example.
Hi, this is Mary Olswang. I have my hand up. I don't know if you see it.
Yeah. No, yeah, go ahead.
Let me put it down so it doesn't linger. I have a question about the expert form. Is that just for the folks that are on the call or work for agencies, or could that be for anyone else that's doing work in the watershed, like another nonprofit? The reason I'm asking is I was wondering if the other folks working in a watershed that observe a barrier or treat a barrier, if they have to go through CDFW to update the pad, or if they can update the pad on their own.
Hi, Mary, it's Anne.
Hi,
yeah.
Anne.
How are you? To answer the question, I think the question is, through this process, yes, they can be an expert. They can be added to expert list. So sorry we didn't define experts. I must have left that off of the presentation, but how we are defining experts is anyone who has some fish passage expertise and also has knowledge of the watershed. So obviously sounds like they have knowledge of the watershed. And yeah, it's not just agencies that we are including. We all obviously are including nonprofits and watershed groups too. We have some on the list, but it's great to expand upon that. We even have, so we need as many experts, I would say, as possible, especially since if they are on the ground collecting data or making observations.
And then the second part is the question that you had was whether they had to go directly to CDFW to update or could they update it themselves? Do you mean through this process or do you mean generally?
Generally.
Generally. And do you mean CDFW as coming to me to update it, or do you mean like have an online form and update it?
I'm not sure. Like I'll give a like scenario that a partner there's some barriers that are unknown. So a partner went out and did a survey and was able to identify if they're a barrier or not, so they can take it out of that unknown status. And so if they can let you know directly, or should they go through CDFW?
Oh, no, they don't need to go for CDFW. They can go directly to me. In fact, I'm sorry I didn't also include that. This has been a great question, so I know what to include next on the webinars, future webinars, because I think what I should say is there's several ways of providing data to me, but it's actually much easier, I think, to go directly to the pad, because I do know sometimes people have gone to other agencies like CDFW and such, and then it should end up, I think, essentially in the pad, but let's make more direct would be best, I would say. My contact information, if they need it, is on the CalFish website in the About tab, I believe. If not, you can just forward them my contact information, but they can go directly to me.
Okay, so but if there is someone that we know that's working in the watershed, they ought to fill out that form though and become official, or?
Yeah, that would be easiest if they could add. We can make sure that they're on the expert list, but we also know which watersheds they have expertise in. Okay. And then in addition, if you give me the name or send it, we can, but I don't know if we mentioned is this webinar is recorded. So we're planning on sending out this webinar to all of you who have participated today, but also those who couldn't participate, and anyone else, feel free to forward it. And we'll post it on the forum's website too.
Okay. I'll add one more question. And when you do make these updates, and you said you make them 3 times a year, is that what you said?
Well, to BIOS, not to the pad specifically, right? But I mean and not to the pad data portal. It's just the BIOS part so far. That's just updating. That's just creating basically a GIS layer for BIOS. So the GIS layer that was mentioned, and then BIOS, and then the Google Earth, those are updated 3 times a year. But the updates in the pad itself are faster, I mean, more frequently than 3 times a year. And so, but then the pad data portal, what happens is basically it's a different database that's basically mirroring or copying the pad. So that's why it's updated the day after.
Okay, I was just wondering, like, going back to my scenario.
Yes.
So that if there are other people working in the watershed that report and update, if it's possible to alert CDFW that updates have been made, or like when you make the updates, do you alert people that there's some new, it's been refreshed or renewed, and maybe have a list of what's new? Or I know that's asking a lot probably, but I was just wondering, like, so that there's not a information gap between, so that the people working for CDFW know the status, the new status, or that it was reported and the status was changed. Because if they report directly to you, then perhaps we wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's true. I would say that's not necessarily happening right now. I haven't been contacting CDFW. I'm happy to do that. I'm even happy to create a list. I know, so this is the general, what we do. When an update is provided and it's made in the pad, I reply to the person when I made it. Sometimes I might make it right away, but maybe take a little bit to reply, but I'll reply back to the person I made it. But I haven't included CDFW, so it just goes to them.
But when I make the update, I haven't also been creating a list of what updates. The only thing you can see is you can look at the update field in the pad to see when it's last updated. So you could query that, and I can walk you through that. That's one way of doing it. Another thing that I'm happy to, it's probably fairly easy to create an update, like say what was updated last, create a list. It might be a lot for people to look at, and I probably won't want to include every field, and I might not want to say exactly what was up. I mean, you know, say the barrier status was updated here. It'd probably be too much to do that, but I can just give you kind of update, or I can help you decide how to query it. I mean, we can work on what's best if anyone else, but I think that's a great thing. I know in the past I had provided like a list of remediations that occurred, you know, starting from the most recent down to the least recent. I was hoping that people would look at that and see. I was giving that to the entire fish passage community when I made updates to hopefully facilitate more updates and get people to look at that and update it. But that wasn't happening either at the time, not much. Some I was getting some updates, but I think what you're asking is just a little different kind of list.
Okay. All right,
But
thanks, Sam.
the only thing is, like, who would I contact at CDFW to, like, would you want me to contact, like the regional or the person working in that watershed? Would it be you or district biologist per se? Yeah, I think more communication, certainly involving CDFW with CDFW would be great.
Yeah. Well, you can contact me or like our fish passage, fish pack representative is Derek Acom. So
Okay,
he might
Derek.
be appropriate. Okay, great. Yeah, because we use the pad in our SHARP, our sound mounted habitat restoration priority meetings that we've been having to determine where barriers are in our stakeholder meetings. And so it's good to know, you know, that it's up to date and what's in there is accurate. And we have noticed that some things aren't in there. So.
Oh, missing some barriers, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you query it, are they doing a subset of pad where it's just known barriers? Like, are they removing the unknown and unassessed, or are they including everything?
We're removing the unknown and unassessed and putting it in an AGLL layer to look at. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that's what the problem is.
Yeah, no problem. So I think that I'm hoping through this process, obviously, Mary, this will hopefully help clean up. And if we, like you said, we can include as many, you know, watershed groups or people working on the ground, that would be great. As experts, get more information updated. And I'm happy to communicate this to you and Derek and anyone else so that you can make sure that the SHARP is also updated. But remember also, I would probably look at that updated list and as well. But yeah, if the SHARP also sees any barriers that aren't, you know, there, please let me know. I'm happy to add them.
Okay, great.
I can check if they're on the unknown unassessed list and they need to be updated with the area status.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. Appreciate it.
So I see in the chat, Anne, we've got another recommendation for somebody to share or add to the list, Jeff Miller. Thanks, Ian. And then I think a question related to the conversation that we were just having in terms of having an update feed on the website, which might be a lot for what gets updated with the pad plan, but you know, moving forward, and you do some of that already, but that'd be a cool feature too.
Yeah, I can look into that. We do a lot of updates even outside the pad plan too. Yep. But I can certainly follow up on that. Yeah. But just to let you know, again, the update field is pretty good field to know that shows what's been recently updated.
Do you want to pull that up and share it real quick, or?
I am unfortunately using, maybe I can try, but I'm using
right, never mind.
phone. I'm sorry about the
Probably
technology.
not the best day to ask to do that. Another time.
I mean, certainly I can have Neil do that, but like one example was BIOS. He can sort by update field. But I can follow through when we send out emails. I'll just and send out emails to you guys and send you the link to the, I might just include how to do that, how to go about that.
Yep.
But thank you for those suggestions, and I will look into that feed as you mentioned.
Great.
Update feed.
All right. Well, any other questions about any of this? The pad, any other things happening, fish passage related? Good news. And if not, we will let you all go about half an hour early here. Okay. So just thank you again to all of the partners that are helping. And this is definitely not everyone that's provided feedback throughout the pad plan and all of the process that through the other reviews and all of you, but that it would be kind of an endless slew of logos, but maybe we should try to do that. It'd be kind of cool. But thank you all for taking the time to join us today and your great questions, and filling out the form would be wonderful. And please feel free to share it with your partners and colleagues. If you think that they might be interested in participating, we definitely welcome all interested folks. So thanks again. And Ann and Neil, do you have anything else you want to add real quick before we sign off?
Just thank you all for making it. This was a really great turnout. I'm so impressed.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you so much. It's about your morning, some of your morning time to listening to us and providing great questions and comments.
Great. All right. Well, we'll be in touch. And please have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.